Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the rise and downfall of champions in League of Legends. Today I want to talk about one of League's biggest downfall in history, which is Lee Sin. In case you didn't know about this yet, Lee Sin used to be one of the most popular champs for many years. Back in 2014, he had over a 45% play rate in popularity, and as years went by, his popularity dropped down all the way to 12%. Along with that, he also has an incredibly low, around 46% win rate in the patch we live in today. How did this happen? And is it still possible to fix Lee Sin? Let's dive a little bit deeper into the champ. Lee Sin's design is actually very impressive. This champ can be played as a bruiser, but can also be played as an assassin or even a tank. And while he's mainly being played inside the jungle, he can also be played in both top and mid lane. Now, even though the champ is very viable and can be played in any way you like, Lee Sin has always suffered from one problem for many years. This is the scaling of Lee Sin. This champ has always been designed to be incredibly strong in the early game and weak towards the late game, which means that the longer the game takes, the harder it's going to be to actually win the game. This is very healthy design, but doesn't quite work that well in the season we live in today. Here's why. Over the course of many years, a lot of new champions were added to League, and most of these champions have received an update design that often beats older champions easily. Think about Bel'Veth as an example. Even though Bel'Veth is designed to outscale just about anyone at late game, Bel'Veth's abilities work extremely well within the early game as well. So why even bother playing Lee Sin if you can literally play other champions that have multiple dashes and perform much better throughout the game? Another topic worth to mention is Lee Sin's history with buffs and nerfs. This champion has received a ton of balancing changes over the years. Lee Sin has always either been way too broken or just straight up terrible. Here's why. Lee Sin is one of the hardest champions to play out of all current existing champions in the game. In general, this is not really much of an issue, as you have many other champions like Riven, Aurelia, Yasuo, and Yone performing well regardless of the skill. However, Lee Sin, you must perform well in the early game, otherwise you're gonna fall behind too much at late game and become useless. This means that you must be a good player, otherwise Lee Sin is no option at all. Now, if Riot decides to buff Lee Sin too much, the best Lee Sin players will be obliterating solo queue, which is unhealthy for the game. However, if Lee Sin is nerfed again, this means that bad Lee Sin players won't be able to perform well at all. This results in less people playing Lee Sin and also explains the fall of Lee Sin's win rate. Now, all these problems aside, Lee Sin can still be played as a mid-game or late-game champion. A lot of Lee Sin players like to build more tanky towards the late game as Lee Sin falls off, which is great because you can still make up great teamfights by either starting the engage or making the perfect play with your ultimate. However, if you want to be a little stronger towards late game, you want to build as much damage as possible when ahead of the enemy team. If you keep snowballing throughout the game and you make leads in one way or another, if you build a lot of damage, you can still do a lot later on. Sure, you aren't a Bel'Veth or Master Yi that can right-click people at late game, however, this is not needed to carry. If you consistently play well on Lee Sin, and your goal is to stay ahead throughout the full game, Lee Sin will actually do great. Especially on Lee, since your goal is to crush the early game. So how would I fix Lee Sin? First of all, I have no experience in game or champion designs, but I've had some thoughts for this champion for a really long time. Basically, I've been thinking about doing a revert of Lee Sin to an earlier state of back in the day. In case you have never seen or heard this before, Lee Sin had a lot more tools in his abilities back in the day. This is probably hard to believe, but Lee Sin used to gain a shield when jumping to wards back in the day, and if you were to jump to wards, you also wouldn't lose half of its cooldown. This was incredibly broken back in the day because there weren't that many champions in the game that could dash or make flashy plays that Lee Sin could. However, now that we are 10 years ahead, I think it's only fair to make Lee Sin a more mobile character by reverting it, since the newest champions all have some broken dashes in their kit already. Now, this change will definitely not fix Lee Sin at all, but it does make him slightly better at late game since he could make more plays around the map. Another idea I've had is to give Lee Sin's E something new. Instead of just applying a slow on the second cast, I think it would be great to give Lee Sin the ability to slow enemies their attack speed and then make it so it scales. This will give Lee Sin a new reason to play at late game without buffing any damage, and it also wouldn't matter if you build towards a tank or assassin at late game. Back in the old days of Lee Sin, he actually already had an attack speed slow on his second cast. However, Riot decided to remove this because Lee Sin was way too overpowered at the game. However, since I've mentioned earlier, a lot of new champions are added to League now, and they have an amazing well-updated strong design, so I think it's only fair to have Lee Sin reverted to his original state. And by doing so, no damage buffs are needed to balance him every season. Now, the most important question is Lee Sin still worth playing? Personally, I still think it is. Lee Sin might have a super weak late game, but that doesn't mean you cannot carry. Lee Sin is still a very strong early game champ, and if you can snowball early, you can easily win the game at mid game before Lee Sin falls off. Even if you aren't a good Lee Sin player, I still highly encourage you to try and play him as he is incredibly fun to play, and once you master him, it will be very rewarding. There's a lot of high elo Lee Sin players in the current patch we live in today, and that easily proves enough that this champion is still worth playing and learning. Of course, if you want an easier path to climb in League of Legends, I highly advise just playing other champions instead, as their learning curve is a lot lower and more rewarding if you are new. Personally, I always recommend people to just play whatever they enjoy, as if you enjoy and have fun with your champ, you're much more likely to stick with that champ and learn more about it, but that's up to you to decide. Anyway, while making this video, it does make me kind of sad of what Lee Sin has become over the years. Lee Sin was actually one of my first ever mains in League of Legends, and I've used this character to climb to Platinum for my first time ever. He used to be super strong in the older days, and also felt perfectly balanced as the late game didn't really matter that much. Obviously now it's a lot different because the meta changes every year, and so does the entire game. It's just really disappointing that Riot hasn't really done anything other than damage buffs or nerfs to fix the champ. Again, no reworks are needed, but just a few small and simple changes would make him a lot more viable. Anyway, I'd really like to know what you guys think about the current play rate and win rate of Lee Sin. What do you guys think that Riot could do any differently? Do you think that Lee Sin needs a rework or just a few updates to make him more viable? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And with that said, thank you so much for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys in the next video.